What's happening, guys? This is AJ. Today we're going to talk about something that's probably the most confusing aspect of nutrition, at least in my eyes, and that's carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are an interesting animal because a lot of people think that low carb is the way to go if you're an athlete. A lot of people group carbohydrates into one big category and they don't kind of segment them into different categories, which I think is a huge mistake. So when someone says carbs, especially on the internet or on a blog like this, people say, oh, they just throw all carbs together: white sugar, fruit, processed carbohydrates like Twinkies, and et cetera, like sweet potatoes and whatnot. And I think that's a huge mistake. It is a huge mistake, because all carbs are not the same, just like all fats are not the same, right? Saturated fat can be really, really good for you, but trans fats can be really bad for you. So obviously you can't just generalize with a blanket statement like that. So back to carbohydrates, though. A lot of people have been jumping on this low carb kind of bandwagon with paleo and maybe even the Weston A. Price diet, and I think that they're well-meaning diets, but my opinion is that you should focus more on a whole foods diet, right? A lot of the diets that are prescribed, again, like Weston A. Price or Dr. Perlmutter from Grain Brain, are recommending that you limit your carbohydrates, such as, potatoes, root vegetables like beets, yams, sweet potatoes, maybe even white rice, brown rice, and etc. And there's good reasons to limit those foods in particular instances, like if you have type 2 diabetes or you have some type of insulin resistance where your sugar metabolism is off. I think that's a great way to temporarily address that problem nutritionally. That's a great way to address it. However, I think that completely demonizing a food group is a big mistake, and I think that the devil's in the details. So what do I mean by that? Well, what if you're a hard-charging athlete like myself who trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or you play hockey, or you need some type of sustained fuel that can fuel you for your high-intensity exercises, right? Sports like soccer, sports like basketball, football, weightlifting, you're burning through a lot of energy. You need a lot of energy to fuel those things, and they're short bursts of energy. So like soccer, for instance, you're sprinting for a few seconds, and then you're kind of like resting and jogging, and then you're sprinting, and the same thing with hockey, and even more so with football. So what type of energy system is being utilized there? Well, it's primarily an anaerobic energy system, and we need carbohydrates to fuel that energy system. Now, back to fats. Fats are really good for kind of like the low-level energy systems. Like if I'm just walking, I'm not really burning a lot of carbohydrates, right? If I'm doing gardening work, I'm really not burning through a lot of muscle glycogen, right? If you haven't heard that word, glycogen is like the fuel that's stored in your muscles that's able to be utilized for short bursts of activity, high intensity. Think of carbohydrates as your fuel that just burn like twigs. They burn hot and fast, and then it's done. Fats, on the other hand, are like logs. They go really slow, but they burn for a long, long time. So they could sustain you at a low level for a while. So, like I said, back to carbs, though. Carbs are real important in the sense of athletic performance because you need to fuel your workouts. Now, it's a big mistake, and I made this mistake, to cut them out completely because you're saying that all carbohydrates are equal. Now, fruit is really good for you. In my opinion, there's people that would disagree with that. Oh, people in the paleo community say that fruit is bad because, well, now it's hybridized and it's bred for sweetness. Well, yeah, no shit, because our taste buds are bred for sweetness. We like sweet shit. There's no coincidence about that. We like sweet stuff, and we're just kind of farming for that. We're producing foods that we enjoy, and there's nothing wrong with that. As far as the nutritional quality of a fruit that's shipped across the world, yeah, it's going to be less nutritious than if you picked it right off a tree in Costa Rica and ate a mango. Of course it's going to be. But it doesn't mean that it's lost all its nutritional value. It doesn't mean that it's bad for you. And it certainly doesn't mean you have to avoid it. So I think this silly nonsense with saying that fruit's not really good for you, and you know how fruit and fructose, the sugar in fruit, is bad for you. It's very misleading. And when doctors like Dr. McCullough, who's a well-meaning, well-respected doctor, and I enjoy him very much, but he says, you know, avoid fructose. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? What does that statement mean? Avoid fructose. Does that mean avoid fruit? Or does that mean avoid high fructose corn syrup that's processed and produced by industry, right? And so you have to differentiate between those two things and read between the lines. And it's become like ridiculous these days. So, and people take that out of context, especially in the paleo world. They say, oh, Dr. McCullough or this expert or this doctor said that fructose should be avoided, so don't eat fruit. Well, there's more than just fructose in fruit. You know what I'm saying? So you cannot just generalize like that. Fruit is good for you. And if fruit is making you fat or fruit is making you gain weight, then it's not the fruit's fault. It's your fault. It's your sugar metabolism. You have shitty sugar metabolism, therefore you cannot process and assimilate the sugar effectively. Maybe you have some insulin resistance or whatever. You are not utilizing those carbohydrates effectively because you're doing something wrong in your lifestyle. Maybe you're not sleeping well or enough, so your insulin sensitivity is off. Maybe you're not moving. You're sitting at a desk all day long. Maybe you don't work out. So all these things are compounding factors. You can't just demonize fruit. Same thing with potatoes or sweet potatoes and yams. I encourage you to try to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on a ketogenic diet because you won't last. There's no way. Your body will start eating muscle. You won't be able to perform at the intensity and recover effectively. You won't be able to maintain a volume of intensity over a course of a week or months or years. You're going to burn out. Your hormones will go to the shitter. Your sleep will be affected, and your strength will be affected. And this is all from personal experience. I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen to you. I encourage you to try this out, but this is what's happened with me, right? So I cut out carbs. And when I say carbs, I cut out starches. I cut out potatoes and rice, and primarily. And the only carb source I was really eating was blueberries, which is not a whole hell of a lot, right? So, and I was training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and lifting and kettlebells and all this shit all week long. And those blueberries, as good as they were not sustaining me throughout the week. So I was in a carbohydrate deficit. I was in a calorie deficit. And I was losing weight rapidly. I was burning through. I had no muscle glycogen, right? My muscles were flat. My body was utilizing protein as glucose because I had no glucose in my body. Glucose is sugar. And so, you know, I put myself in a shitty situation, and my hormones were affected. You know, so you can't do that. That's my whole point. If you're a hard-charging athlete, you need to have carbohydrates. But back to starches. Starches are really good because they're going to provide a really dense source of nutrition. I think root vegetables are the best kind of vegetables that you can have. Not to say that you only need to eat root vegetables, right? Root vegetables are like beets, carrots, potatoes, yams, shit like that. You need to have those in your diet because they have a high nutrient density. They have a lot of, think about this, they're in the soil, and the soil is where you get a lot of your nutrition from, your minerals and your vitamins. So that root vegetable is absorbing all that deliciousness, right? The ginger, turmeric is awesome for you because why? Because it's in the soil and it's absorbing all of that. So all that deliciousness is going into that root, and now you're going to eat that or use that as a food, and that's why it's so good. So to avoid a food like that is retarded, in my opinion. It's just plain retarded. You know, protein's very important, fat's important, but I see far too many people idolizing fat these days. Fat's great. There's nothing magical about fat, and there's nothing magical about carbs or protein, right? You need all three. You can't subsist on just one or the other, or the other, right? There's nothing. But I see guys like for instance, Dave Asprey. He puts grass-fed butter on everything, right? Grass-fed butter can be great for a lot of people. Some people like myself, though, don't do good on dairy at all, and that's fine. But there's nothing magical about fat. Like, you need some fat, right? Olive oil and butter and coconut oil and red palm oil and all these great things, and avocados. But I see people going out of their way to incorporate into their diet more fat than is necessary, right? So they're going out of the way to grab avocados to put in like every dish in the morning with their eggs and coconut oil, like fat's some magical nutrient. No, you need to have nutrient variety. You need to have two separate fuel sources for your body, for yourself, for life: fat and carbs. And you need protein, obviously, for muscle repair and amino acids, and for mood, and for a whole host of other things. That's an entirely different afternoon. But you need carbs and fat for energy. And if you just idolize one or the other, it's going to be to your detriment, and to the detriment to your performance. So you need you need both, and you can't just cut out one or the other. And I think it's a dumb thing to do. And especially if you're an athlete, you need starch and carbohydrates, in my opinion, right? To really fuel your body, right? It's like your body's like a Formula One race car. If you're an athlete, you're beating the shit out of it, right? It's not necessarily the most healthy thing in the world to like kick your ass in the gym and spar maybe, or roll or jujitsu every day. It's like being in a car or wrestle. It's like being in a car accident every single day. Like, you're really damaging and causing a lot of inflammation. So that's why nutrition is so important. But if you're cutting out one of your fuel sources, your main fuel source is carbohydrates, glycogen. You're cutting that out, and you're using the wrong fuel for the wrong for the wrong activity. You're using fats. Or vice versa. Maybe you're eating a shit ton of carbohydrates and you're not moving, so you're gaining weight, and you say, oh, carbs are bad. No, motherfucker, you're bad. Your sugar metabolism sucks because you're sitting on your fucking ass all day, and you need to get up and move intensely, right? So it's just like a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of bullshit to say and demonize certain food groups and say like, oh, dude, potatoes are bad. Potatoes aren't fucking bad. Okay, yams aren't bad. Carrots aren't bad. Root vegetables and beets and all that good shit aren't bad. Your lifestyle is affecting your body more than your diet is. Okay, people don't understand that their environment affects them more than the foods that they put in their body. So if that's the case, then how can you say that this vegetable or this carb source is bad or good? Right? It depends on the individual. So if you're a hard-charging athlete, you need carbs. That's my basic message. Stop listening to people who say that you don't need carbs, that you can be a ketogenic athlete. Listen, give it a shot. Try it. Fuck yourself up. Screw your hormones up. You're going to feel like shit, and you're going to drag ass. At least that was my experience. Okay? But the way I learn is to try it. And if I encourage you to try it, try a ketogenic diet if you play football. I'll tell you what, there's nobody in the NFL on a ketogenic diet. They're all eating carbohydrates. They're probably eating glutinous carbohydrates, which is obviously not good for you. But they're eating massive carbohydrates. They're eating pasta. They're eating rice. They're eating potatoes. I'm not saying to eat gluten. I hate gluten is bad. I think gluten should be avoided 100%. But I think things like potatoes and root vegetables associated with that should be eaten, and especially if you're an athlete. So guys, if you like this video, please hit like, please subscribe, and if you have anything to add to the conversation, or if you have a question of any kind, throw me a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. See you later. Peace.